One thing I will always be happy to use my platform for is to shed light on the horrendous conditions and situations that are happening abroad that just don't get enough attention, from Gaza to Haiti. And I mean, there's more on that list than I could count. And I try to reach out to organizations and historians to bring them on and help shed some light to these issues that need justice from a more experienced and, knowledgeable position. And one that has escaped me is Sudan. But I do want to go on record speaking about it and shedding light about what's happening, because it's nothing short of another genocide and humanitarian crisis that is happening and has been happening there as well. Yet it gets little to no coverage that it deserves. Most people aren't even aware that it's happening. So let's watch just a few clips and see what we can discuss to shed some light on this very horrendous issue.
Reuters reported just recently that residents displaced by fighting or under siege in their homes have resorted to eating dirt and leaves. Yes, dirt and leaves. And look, as I said before, it didn't get this bad only recently. It's been this bad for months. We just haven't been paying attention. In February, the Associated Press reported that 13 children die of malnutrition each day at a camp for the displaced in northern Darfur. More than 75% of health facilities are out of operation. More than 20,000 cases of cholera recorded this year alone. People have no idea across the world that this is happening in Sudan. In fact, according to a new poll by Data for Progress here in the United States, when Americans were asked how much they knew about what was happening in Sudan, 36% said they knew a little, 59% said nothing at all.
The history of Sudan is no less tragic than that of, say, Gaza, yet it gets 1/100th of the coverage that Gaza gets. They are one of the largest homes for refugees in Africa, having over 1 million in their population. Where this spiral has happened or began, I guess it's been occurring since 2003 and the Darfur crisis, where non-Arabs were essentially ethnically cleansed, leading to the death of hundreds of thousands of civilians, a genocide indictment, and a spiral into poverty and authoritarian rule that, as Mehdi mentioned here, lasted a long time, but there was optimism to be broken in 2019, only to have a military coup just a few years later kind of thrust them right back into this situation. Sudan is a region that's heavily impacted by climate change as well, right? This causes the crop and livestock to face destruction that leads to obvious food insecurity issues throughout the region. We also, like a lot of other capitalist Western countries, extract money from their economy regularly, as we do most of the global South, while also regularly interfering in their governments. So this causes the statistics and effects that you heard Mehdi rattle off here become long-term unsolvable problems that are exacerbated rather than addressed.
It's basically a displacement, a huge displacement situation, crisis. We have a health crisis. We have epidemics, like a lot of cholera right now is turning up. There's not enough hospitals for everyone. It's a really bad situation in all areas of Sudan, and even in the safe areas of where the army is located.
And of course, the ignorance about Sudan abroad is partly manufactured by the military and the militias, because they, as in Gaza, have blocked journalists from going into places. They have targeted journalists, they've killed journalists, detained journalists, done internet blackouts. It's very hard for people to find out what's happening on the ground in Sudan. How do people like yourself, people in the diaspora, how do they keep touch with family, friends back home? How do you get updates as to what's going on? How hard is it?
It's extremely hard. It's extremely hard. One of my friends who recently moved from the RSF areas to the safe army areas, he said it's more dangerous to have a camera than to have a weapon.
Wow.
And this is a constant you see in these authoritarian regimes that carry out essentially fascism. The first step is destroy media and institutions. Don't let in journalists. That way, the narrative can always be skewed and controlled by you. And anything negative that comes to light or is said about you, you can just attack the credibility of it outright, and I definitely don't want to make this video about America, but it's exactly what the fear is here from what we can see Donald Trump is doing and has done with his attacks on media, from rhetoric to actually taking action against whistleblowers in his first administration, and now threatening to sue and pull licenses from media stations that are unfavorable to him. But in Sudan, I mean, this has already happened. We see the end result of it, and now it's hard to get a full context of what's happening when a genocide is being carried out, and it's harder to drum out the international outrage, the global outrage that drives pressure to change these situations, as ultimately these factions will never stop as long as they feel like they can get away with it, right? And without serious sanctions, global pressure, a level of intervention, even if necessary, though that kind of gets a bit, it was the right thing to do, but it'll never just happen naturally. So something needs to be done, and it's long overdue.
A recent UN fact-finding mission found that 63 out of 65 people tried by army-convened courts for working for the RSF were actually aid workers and activists.
You really don't know what is the truth. And it's exactly the same situation that is happening everywhere else. It's very kind of even football hooligans kind of looking at the war. If you're with the army, you're 100% with the army. No matter how many people they kill, no matter how many mistakes they make, they still cheer for the army. If you were the RSF, it doesn't matter if they are, genocidal. It doesn't matter if they're killing innocent people. It doesn't matter if they're shooting at schools and hospitals. They're still with the RSF. It's incredible. And that, again, comes back to the lack of real trusted news coming out of Sudan.
Khalid, you, of course, are an artist, and you use your art to tell the story of Sudan in ways that words simply cannot. The war in Sudan is one with...
I mean, does this sound familiar to anyone? I'm telling you, as we go through these together and we grow and we learn even more and more about these kinds of situations happening abroad, I want y'all to pick up on the patterns and cycles that fascism goes through, that oppressors carry out on the oppressed, because it begins to become really easy to spot. This is the exact same playbook that is being carried out by Israel in Palestine right now. Shoot civilians, question if they're working with the bad guys, and then don't let in journalists or media so nobody can report on the truth. And you can always question it and, say, oh, I have the high ground because of the accusations, right? And again, when I watched this, I was mind blown, but not at the same time, because it's like, wow, to a T, the same thing is happening here, which is what you would expect with fascism, but nobody's connecting the dots. I mean, partially this is, of course, because Sudan isn't getting the kind of media push that Palestine is. And Palestine obviously is also only getting the push through American media, through the lens of Israel, and Israel being the victim. So it's not really the justice it deserves either. But just know that these atrocities are happening abroad. We as a channel are not going to forget them and let them fall out of our media cycle. And just know that as many things America does right, one of the things it does the most wrong is some of these atrocities we enable, some we ignore, and some we do fight against. But I wish we didn't pick and choose which oppressors we were going to fight and which of the oppressed we want to defend. And I also wish that these lines weren't so often drawn on racial lines where, those who are oppressed that are, white facing, the Ukrainians, we need to defend them. But those brown people being oppressed, the Gazans, they're terrorists and we can't defend them. I mean, come on, it should be unilateral.